Hey there, I'm John Negroni. I'm the film editor for theyoungfolks.com, and I'm also the host of the Cinemaholics podcast. The Book of Boba Fett is a new spin-off series from the hugely successful The Mandalorian, but in a more real sense, this is a bookend to the story of Boba Fett, who was always somewhat shortchanged in the mainline Star Wars films. Okay, not somewhat. He always kind of was shortchanged in the movies. But I know that he was explored in greater detail through extended universe media. And that's because fans have always really appreciated this iconic looking bounty hunter and the potential he represents. First seen in The Empire Strikes Back, and of course, as we'll talk about in Return of the Jedi, when he meets his untimely end, or does he? Now, this is his show, as you can kind of imagine from the title. It's a first chapter in a book that is committed to faithfully adding dimensions to an often one-dimensional character, at least in the movies. Chapter 1 begins with Boba Fett himself, reprised by Tamara Morrison, who of course played Boba's canonical clone father, Jango Fett, in Attack of the Clones. I forget exactly how that worked. And he's been a mainstay of the Star Wars franchise ever since, doing voice work for the clones themselves, and of course appearing in Mandalorian Season 2. And we open the show with him resting in a medical pod after we last saw him in the second season of The Mandalorian. And right now he's preparing to muscle into Jabba the Hutt's crime lord power vacuum in Tatooine, where it appears the bulk of this season will take place, if not the whole thing. For those who may have forgotten, this series takes place several years after the events of Return of the Jedi, and like many modern television series, Book of Boba Fett opts to layer in flashbacks concurrent with the show's present in order to add context and fill in some very curious gaps of exposition, explaining and answering questions that I'm sure a lot of people will have, like, what happened to Boba Fett after Return of the Jedi? Well, that's what this pilot begins with. The first section of this 39-minute pilot lingers on the long-speculated escape from the Sarlacc pit, where the character supposedly died in the movies, but that, of course, was not acceptable for the fans, right? Who knew George Lucas or somebody could easily write the character out of that predicament for a triumphant return to the screen, a sort of second chance. Oddly, I think this entire sequence, which fans have been waiting to see for decades, is kind of brief, and it might come off as a bit underwhelming if you set your expectations too high. It has some cool visuals and everything like that, but it's not the main focus of this episode. The director of this episode, by the way, is Robert Rodriguez. I think Spy Kids and many other things, but Spy Kids is always the first thing I think of when I think of Robert Rodriguez, which is probably kind of weird. And also writer and showrunner Jon Favreau, who of course was the showrunner for The Mandalorian. They clearly have more interest in what happens after the Sarlacc pit and beyond. Boba Fett gets stripped of his bounty hunter armor, as we expect, and then abducted into slavery by Tusken Raiders. Now, before that story really gets going, we cut back to the present, where Boba Fett and his assassin ally and right hand, Fennec Shand, played once again by Ming-Na Wen, who was excellent in Mandalorian. They're trying to build their own crime syndicate out of the husk of Jabba's palace. For now, they're mostly recruiting allies, intimidating rivals, and really debating how far Boba Fett should go in creating an atmosphere of ruthlessness and fear, which is where we get into one of the show's biggest weaknesses, but also its greatest opportunity, and that is Boba Fett himself. Thus far, Boba is seen as a bit of a complicated figure morally. He is violent, but only up until a point. Perhaps to soften his edges, Favreau and co-executive producer Dave Filoni, who, by the way, has simply been brilliant in these new legacy stories with Star Wars, they sensibly recognize that a Star Wars anti-hero needs to be at least somewhat grounded in acceptable ethical limits. Perhaps because they know parents are watching this with kids, for better or worse. For example, they make it a point to address Boba's refusal to torture or kill his enemies unless absolutely necessary. But the problem is that we don't yet know why. Why does Boba Fett have this code? It almost makes me wonder if this should be called the Code of Boba Fett, because that seems to be what we're about to hopefully learn. The movies certainly never got into Boba Fett's ideologies beyond a distaste of the Jedi and the political war that claimed his father figure. I haven't seen Star Wars Rebels or any of the other legacy series that ostensibly address more of Fett's backstory, but I do imagine that Favreau and Filoni know that there are a lot of viewers like me to that effect who shouldn't have to do homework in order to understand the main protagonist of a blockbuster live-action series. But as I mentioned, this is also an opportunity to gradually reveal what makes Fett tick. What does he think about? What is he really where does he really belong in this world? As long as the show respects our collective patience and lays more groundwork over the next episode or two. In terms of spectacle and set pieces, Book of Boba Fett is certainly of a piece with Mandalorian in the right ways. You're getting more of that, essentially. The world feels lived in. It's uncomfortable. It's harsh. Whatever comforts there are to be had have to be earned through hard work, luck, and smarts. In other words, it's still a Western. It's set on alien planets, a la the novel Dune. One of the original inspirations for the first Star Wars movie, that novel Dune. But Book of Boba Fett, it has a different flavor from its Mandalorian cousin, which is a good thing in how it can stand apart. You get the sense that we won't be hopping around planets and going on standalone adventures, but rather digging in for a more grounded, expansive exploration of the first Star Wars planet ever visited. Tatooine has always been one of the most diverse and fascinating locations in the entire lore of Star Wars, probably because we keep going back to it, and every time we do, we learn more about its quirks, the people there, the creatures there. You can easily see how a show like this can really dig a lot of water from a single location when we have the Tusken Raider scenes focused more on how is Boba Fett going to survive. It's a survival story, then it's balanced against the present day underworld politics happening in Mos Espa. How is Boba Fett going to survive there? He has to employ a different kind of skill set to win the day. There's something surprising and investing about all these larger-than-life characters fighting so hard and acting so precious about a desert planet as if they were in a constant battle over a lush, luxurious place like the city planet of Coruscant. I guess they just want that desert power. In addition to the Western motif, Book of Boba Fett also has a flair of the Showtime series Spartacus, where we have desperate underdogs battling within themselves and the system in order to thrive under harsh circumstances. To that effect, I think Morrison's a great fit for this kind of character, and as hoped, he keeps the helmet off for most of the show. It's a nice way to differentiate this spinoff from The Mandalorian. In the same way that we can have John Wayne and Clint Eastwood, it appears we can also have Boba Fett and Mando. In book publishing, debut authors are often advised to get rid of prologues because agents and editors, they simply want you to cut right to the chase. But the exception tends to be for more established authors because they know their readers. Their built-in fan base will see a prologue in a book and they're going to have more than enough goodwill to just jump in and eat it all up. That appears to be the strategy with this first episode, which itself is a bit of a hybrid prologue. We do get a sense of the main conflict of the series and what Fett and his gang want. We don't yet know what they need, though we can see glimpses of Fett needing some kind of redemption in the same vein as the iconic character needs redemption within the Star Wars lore. He was always on the margin of the Star Wars franchise, but he was never a main player, and as it stands, I think Favreau and his team apparently have a pretty reasonable and so far exciting proposition for how that can change moving forward. So Chapter 1 of the Book of Boba Fett, it's now available to stream on Disney+. There will be 7 episodes total, each one premiering on Wednesdays. Rodriguez has reportedly directed 2 other episodes, so I think 3 total, along with Jon Favreau is directing an episode or 2. We have Bryce Dallas Howard, Dave Filoni, a lot of Mandalorian mainstays, and then some. I might return with a full season review, depending on how things go once it wraps up, but for now, I'm recommending fans of The Mandalorian give this pilot a watch, even if they found the character somewhat thin in The Mandalorian. I think in this one, there are some missing pages to him that will probably satisfy old and new fans alike. So yeah, check it out. Let me know what you think. That's it for me. I know I haven't been reviewing a lot of movies lately, and that's because I reviewed, I think, all the movies that have been coming out. The only one I didn't get to is Sing 2, and I don't know if I will get to that one because I saw it so long ago. I don't have much to say about Sing 2. It is a movie. But as we go into January, there's a lot of other stuff that I will be sure to get into, and be sure to be checking out Cinemaholics if you want to be tuning into reviews, like podcast reviews and stuff like that for Matrix and, you know, all that extra stuff. I think our Licorice Pizza episode's coming out today, so yeah, definitely check that out if you want. But that is all you're going to get from me today. I will see you all in the next one.